Jamaica's parliament has renewed its call for the United States to end its economic, commercial, and financial embargo on Cuba. Lawmakers say the decades-old policy is hurting banking, trade, and travel links that also affect Jamaican businesses. The House of Representatives passed the annual motion on Tuesday. Minister of State in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, ALANDO argued that the embargo violates international law and blocks access to finance, trade, and essential goods.
Whereas this Honourable House has on the past 16 occasions approved a motion in support of Cuba's resolution submitted in the United Nations General Assembly entitled Necessity of Ending the Economic, Commercial and Financial Embargo imposed by the United States of America against Cuba. And whereas the 63-year-old policy of economic blockade remains in place, despite the fact that 187 member states of the United Nations, including Jamaica, representing the vast majority of the international community, voted last year in favor of the resolution. And whereas there are no formal and normal banking relations between Cuba and the United States, with implications for relations with the international banking system, and whereas there are no and whereas the restrictions on Cuba's international financial transactions, including those with multilateral organizations for cooperation with the island, have intensified with the implementation of the blockade policy, and whereas despite the re-establishment of diplomatic relations in 2015, tourism from the United States to Cuba effectively remains illegal, with limited flights to only the capital city, Havana, and hotels remain off-limits under Cuban-United States relations restrictions on patronizing companies linked to Cuba's military or security services.
He warns that restrictions on Cuban financial transactions are spilling over into the Caribbean banking system.
The United States government tightened the blockade against Cuba with amendments to the Cuban Assets Control Regulations to impose increased restrictions on travel, the processing of remittances, and hotel accommodation properties in 2019 and 2020. Be it resolved that this Honourable House express itself on the morality, legality, and desirability of this decades-old blockade against Cuba and call for renewed dialogue between the United States of America and Cuba and for the lifting of the United States embargo against Cuba.
That was State Minister in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, ALANDO.